So we should just go ahead and get started. We can always acclimate the people who come in later if they end up joining us. So for those who may watch this video after after this event, obviously we know everybody that's here. And Will, we're getting started right now if you want to turn on your video and your audio. But my name is Erin Cronican, and I'm the Executive Artistic Director of the Seeing Place Theater. And I'd love to have everybody here introduce themselves, Crystal, Ken, and Will. We'd love to know where you're calling, put your name, because on the video, your names won't show, where you're calling in from, and what you're hoping to get out of today's event. And then Brandon will introduce himself and we'll kick off the class. So Crystal, why don't we start with you?
All right. I'm Crystal Isley, and I'm calling in from Port Townsend, Washington. So across the sound from Seattle, little town here. And what am I hoping to get out of the class? It's been since last summer since I've done some Shakespeare, and was hoping to do some this summer, and that's so I don't know, I'm just looking for fresh ideas, and maybe to get kicked in the butt if there's something I'm doing that doesn't work, but just some fresh ideas, I guess.
Cool, we love it. Thank you for being here. Ken.
Hi, I'm Ken Raboy. I'm calling in from New York City. I'm pretty close to Carnegie Hall right now, and hoping to get, so I've only formally studied Shakespeare sort of as an English major back in the day, and recently in acting at a 2-weekend workshop with CSC. They had some folks from RSC visiting from London. So I took a weekend workshop, and I auditioned for a part earlier this year. Didn't get it, which was not unexpected because I hadn't worked any plays with Shakespeare. But I'd signed up for a class that was Shakespeare intensive. And of course, because of the pandemic, it was canceled. They just decided not to do that online. So hoping to get is Seeing Place's insight into how to approach Shakespeare. I mean, I can blurt out the lines, but they never quite work for anybody coaching me. So I want to get there, and I just need some maybe good stuff. Today I'll hear probably from me some blings and starting points.
Perfect. Well, hopefully we'll be able to provide that for you. Yeah. Will.
Hi, I'm Will Ketter. I'm an ensemble member at the Seeing Place Theater, and I'm calling in today from Long Island, New York.
Oh.
This one.
Hi. Hi, Emily.
And today I wasn't really planning on doing a lot of work with this. I've already worked with Brandon and Erin in this sort of context before, so I was kind of just hoping to observe and to brush up on things and keep my brain occupied.
Absolutely. Well, you're welcome to read and bring something or ask questions and participate as fully as you feel like you want to throughout, but we love having you here. Absolutely. And then I will be working with you all, kind of as Brandon kicks off the class as an example, apparently. So we'll see how that goes. But I'm learning along with all of you. I've done Shakespeare for a long time, but there's still so much to learn. And Brandon is, and I don't say this lightly, he really is a master at Shakespeare, not only teaching, but also performing it. So you all are in such good hands. So I'll hand it over to you, Brandon.
Oh, thank you. I think Festi wants to get in the over there.
Yeah, letting him in now.
Festi is a dog.
Come here, puppy.
All right. So, I'm Brandon Walker. I'm the producing artistic director of the Seeing Place. I have been doing Shakespeare for most of my life. I was part of a theater company as one of the associate artistic directors that Crystal was involved with for a long time, called Four Players in San Diego. And then here's Phoebe, so we'll have her introduce herself in a moment. And then additionally, I've now been the artistic director and then the producing artistic director here for the last 10 years. So we've done quite a few Shakespeare productions. I've done most of Shakespeare's plays, either as a reading or as a performance. I've done, I'd say, half of them up to 5 times, some of them. So I've been in at least, I don't know, 50 productions. I've stopped counting at a certain point. Yeah, let me do something here real quick. Vivi, are you there?
I am here, but I'm with my mom. I'm trying to multitask, be with her, and listen to you. So
Perfect.
I'm just like listening.
Okay.
And did you, Vivi, did you want to work today on any Shakespeare, or are you just auditing the class?
I'm auditing.
Wonderful. So Vivi is one of our artistic associates in the company. So yeah, welcome. We love having you.
Okay.
Bye. Okay, I'm out.
So very good. So before we get started, I mean, we're already started, but before we get into the main brunt of what we'll be working on, I want to ask a few more questions than have previously been asked. So first of all, at least for Crystal, for Ken, for Aaron, and if you change your mind, then Will let us know. But what are you planning to work on today?
Oh, I
I
didn't know I was to prepare something.
It doesn't have to be prepared.
Oh, I can pull something out of my head, but I didn't know we were supposed to bring a piece.
I'm sorry.
I
Okay.
missed that part. Yeah, let me go grab something.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
I've got, so Brandon, this is Ken. I've got Antigonus when he's dropping the baby off in Bohemia. Come, poor babe. Through the exit pursued by bear.
That's great.
Aaron, I think I brought this up to you last time we worked.
Yes. I'm glad to be able to.
It'll be interesting to hear another point of view. It'll be fun because we worked. Brandon, I brought it to the objectives class. Objectives class. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun piece. Okay, and Aaron?
And I am doing, I think it's the first main monologue in Act 3, Scene 2 of The Winter's Tale, the character of Hermione.
Wow.
It is a brand new piece to me. I've read the play and the role multiple times when we've done readings of it, but this will be the first time that I've broken the monologue down.
Okay. And then we can come back to you, Crystal, unless you already know.
Well, I mean, I think the easiest to pull out of my head would be either Gertrude, since I played her last summer, or probably some Isabella, believe it or not, because I've done her so many times.
Okay. What's
So
the most
I
fun?
don't know if you have a preference.
You don't have a preference?
No, I said I don't know if you have a preference.
I'd say that my preference would be whichever one you feel is more challenging for you, and I would go with that one.
Sorry, I wish I'd known. Was this in the course description? I did not.
Sort of. It was each participant or student will work with a monologue and
Of their choice. Yeah.
Sorry, I just totally missed that. My fault.
It's okay.
Go ahead and
Very good.
I'm gonna.
What do you want to do, Will?
Moi. In terms of challenging, there's a how piece that I have that I used to feel really confident in, and doesn't quite sing for me anymore. So if I work, I'll work on that.
Which play?
Part 1.
Okay, very good. Very good. All right.
And for the people who might not know the history plays, which part 1, which play?
Henry IV.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a few more questions. So I just want to follow up with you, Ken. You had said I can blurt out the lines, but they never quite work for anyone coaching me. What does that mean?
Well, let me give you an example. I mean, if I had really thought hard about working on something, when I first tried Iago, so as an example, it was at a time when I was studying with Austin Pendleton, and he felt the military aspect of the man's background was missing. And he also felt that I was not truly engaging with what was being said. Okay.
Being said to you, or being said what you were saying?
What I was saying. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, things like, so I had things like, I hate them more, and it is thought of blah that twixt my seats is done mine office. Those things trip off the tongue, but I think I just don't really know how to dive into the language to make it mine own. Listen to that, mine own. Yeah.
Okay. Very good.
Does that answer your question, Brandon?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, great, thanks.
Um,
I'm just learn from my water bottle, so I'll just I left this on. Oh, there it is, right at my feet to knock over. Okay. Sorry.
Will, can you explain a little bit more what you mean when you say that it's not that the monologue hasn't been working for you as much anymore?
Well, it was one of the first speeches that I learned, and so at the time, like the challenge of getting through the language and sort of keeping the situation alive was, I guess, like enough of a challenge that it kept me present in what I was doing. And now that I've sort of moved past that place in my study, there's nothing for me to like hold on to. I'm not sure what to focus on, and I feel like it kind of becomes sort of, now it's my turn instead of like a legitimate need to communicate.
Yeah, okay.
That's the best I can sort of describe it.
Do you know what you're going to work on, Crystal?
Well, sorry, I wish I'd had this prepared.
It doesn't need to be prepared.
Yeah, I'm completely.
Yeah, it does.
We're not here to do great Shakespeare necessarily. We're here to work with where we are within how we speak Shakespeare. It's not, we're not coming out of this with monologues we're ready to perform on stage and present to the industry. We're working through the issues that we run into as we work on monologues.
Cool. Right? All right. In that case, what the heck? I'll do a Hamlet monologue.
Yay!
How about that? This is the script I've got in front of me.
Sure. Which monologue do you want to do?
Let's do... Oh, give me one more sec.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I've already more or less heard this from Ken and from Will. What challenges, Aaron, would you say you run into when you're approaching a Shakespeare piece?
Any Shakespeare piece or this one? Because they're different.
Start here, and then if there are other ones that other issues that you feel are consistent, then share those as well.
Yeah, I think with this piece, and we've talked about this a little bit before, I feel that there is a performance standard for how this character behaves. And I think it makes sense, the standard of that she is dignified and she's in a bit of shock, and she's really incredulous that she would be accused of these things, especially in front of all these people, where she's been a leader in her life. And but I have an interest as an actor to explore very deeply in the realm of betrayal and the realm of like the embarrassment. And I always feel like when I see this performed, that stuff is thrown away in favor of this regal woman, and that she is often read very harsh. I mean, relatable, I guess, within the harshness, but it's almost like the actor is usually trying to prove something about their strength. And I think that there's a lot of traps there for women in particular when you're playing a quote unquote strong woman. And so I'm battling what I hear in my head with what I want to do. And so I'm interested today in being able to use the language to share more than just one facet and one like veneer that she might have, so that we can see through to what's really going on with her.
Okay, very good. Back to you, Crystal.
All right. Now might I do it, Pat? I think I'm gonna go with that in 3-3. Yeah.
So you had mentioned earlier that you're looking for fresh ideas and perhaps to get kicked in the butt a little bit. What issues, if any, do you run into when you're approaching a Shakespeare piece?
When I, through a rehearsal process, when I begin to know the text really well, I do tend to speed through it and go quite quickly, and not. I have to remind myself to look at it with a fresh ear of my audience, being able to hear this for the first time, being able to have it be fresh for them for the first time. That's one thing. So like just not running ideas together and letting the ideas really sink in. That's something that first comes to my mind.
Okay.
I think I'm also a little bit shy and just really letting the language sing. Like there are people who just, not chew the scenery with it, but there are people who just really enjoy the sounds of the language and really let them be very alive. And sometimes I feel I'm shy with that, so I don't take as much time with it. That
Do you feel like you should be doing that, or what is it that makes you shy about that?
I think they're both coming from the same place of wanting to express the ideas in a connected way, and knowing when I can take the time with that imagery and still connect the ideas. I connect the storytelling, if that makes sense.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to talk for a minute. Obviously, we only have 2 hours. It's not, and now only an hour and 40 minutes. And there's only so much that you can cover in an hour and 40 minutes when it comes to how to speak Shakespeare. Now, many of you also have a large background in it yourselves, so we're not necessarily starting from scratch. I want to just point out a couple of things that I do. They're not necessarily industry standard. Similarly to what you're saying, Crystal, I know I go to see a lot of people do Shakespeare, and they seem to be so insistent upon the poetic aspects of Shakespeare that I feel like I lose touch with the humanity behind it. So that if it's just someone singing lines, then it becomes very hard to listen to, even if they're not in the traditional kind of singing Shakespeare voice that we're used to, or they're not putting on some sort of mid-Atlantic accent. Even if they're speaking in their own voices, but it's this kind of thing that has a, I don't know why it needs to be that, personally. It's, Shakespeare has got to be the least poetic playwright of his day. And it's not to say that the things that he says are not poignant. I think they are much of the time, but the more our attention is on making them poignant or making sure that the poetry is expressed, the less it actually ends up being poetic in terms of the people watching and listening. To give you a brief example of that outside of Shakespeare, because I think it gets convoluted when we start to talk about it within Shakespeare. So if we can start to see how that operates outside, it's important. We did a production as our first production here called The Credo Canvas. And in it, there is a character that I was playing named Winston, who's a painter. And there's a whole lot of drama that goes on, and he falls in love with a girl, and he draws her, and they're both naked, and it ruins her relationship with her boyfriend, who is his best friend, and that person kills himself, and then the relationship falls apart. Winston stops speaking to Amelia, and then 4 years later, she shows up at his place. That's a very brief introduction to what's going on at this point, right? And she asks if she can see the Credo Canvas, which is the title of the play, and that is the painting that he did of her. And they're both looking at it. And she says something I honestly don't even remember what she says about worrying about whether or not Winston thinks of her. Now, in the first performance that we did of the show, when David, my acting teacher, was there, that to him was one of the most poignant things that he had ever heard, not only me say, but any poignant moment on stage. And he shared that with me. And what it was is right after that, I said to her, I'm never not thinking about you. And I didn't make a big deal of it. I wasn't trying to make sure that the Sturm und Drang was appropriate in that moment. I just said it simply. But the fact that it was also connected to what was actually going on, and it so perfectly expressed the moment of what the actor was dealing with without pushing, was what made it have an impact. He told me that. And then he came to see it again a couple of weeks later. And because I had in the back of my mind, ooh, this is a poetic moment, we got to that moment. And it's not that it didn't feel particularly different from me, but I had it in the back of my mind. This was, what, 10 years ago. I was not yet as developed as I am now as an actor to be able to put those things out of mind. So now I'm doing it, and I say, I'm never not thinking about you. And of course, it didn't have the same kind of impact, because we all know how important the actor thinks it is. You know what I'm saying? And that's the sort of thing that I feel like I'm watching with Shakespeare much of the time. I watch people's egos perform what they have in mind as being important or not within the lines that they're speaking, right? So that's the first thing, is just to talk about the fact that it doesn't need to be poetic. And that's my approach to things. That may not be everyone's approach to things. And that part is not necessarily of great import. There are many ways that you can work on Shakespeare. So some of the things that I do, just to give an example, Will was just involved in a production of Measure for Measure that I was directing and playing the Duke in last year. And I know, Crystal, you know it. I don't know if you know it, Ken, or if you saw it. Did you?
College. In college, I did Angelo in college, but it's been decades.
Mm-hmm.
The Duke is considered to be one of the most confusing, not one of the most confusing role in Shakespeare, and has got to have some of the most convoluted text I've ever seen in my life. And I was really struggling throughout a good majority, not only of rehearsals, but of performances as well. And I spent, I'd say 3-4 hours at least after every show, just going through the play and recording myself and listening to myself speaking it and going back and reading the text and trying to figure out how to make it mean what I intellectually understood it meant, and how it means that. Not only that I get that, okay, if I boil that down to my understanding of language, this is what it means. How does each word contribute to that meaning? And I found that very difficult. And throughout the process of my doing that, I watched upwards of 10 productions, just trying to see how do people deal with this language. And especially in the first two or three scenes, I found it to be particularly hard. And I think I read about 10 books on those scenes. I watched about 10 performances trying to understand how to deal with it. And I didn't have the opportunity to see anyone that solved the problem. They either just cut the lines or they rushed through them so quickly as to have them be ignored. You know, there's a whole performance standard with Shakespeare that many of you might recognize if you've seen people like, oh, I'm not going to come up with any names, am I? So if you've seen like the English Shakespeare productions with Michael Pennington, there we go. Back in the day, this was probably the 80s that this was done. There was a sort of performance standard then that a lot of Shakespearean actors do, where they rush through and rush through and rush through and rush through, and then they slow down for an important moment. You know, and
do
so,
that in contemporary plays too.
yeah, and that was very much what I was seeing with the people that were making some degree of sense. It was like it would only make sense sporadically.
Brandon, can I ask before you continue? Is what you're addressing your approach to performing a part or directing the play right now?
What I'm talking about right now is just dealing with text.
Text. Got it. I'm sorry. I lost focus there for a second. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah.
So as I was going through, I eventually had to really work with myself and make it make sense to me, and then speak it in such a way that it made sense to me, and then practice that over and over again until it became mine. And that is really the piece that I feel like is left out much of the time. So that's a background that I'm going to use in talking a little more about this. And I'm going to pull up I'm going to share my screen. And can you all see this?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I know everybody knows this speech, and I know everybody references this speech when it comes to acting Shakespeare. There are some things that can you all see my
Yes.
mouse?
Yeah.
Great. So I think we're all used to this part of the speech, and I mean, I don't know specifically with Ken, so you'll have to tell me if I'm just blowing over.
I'm good on Hamlet.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
But many of the things that tend to be pointed out with this speech, especially as related to acting, is all the gesturing. Oh, we don't want to be gesturing too much. I want to suit the word to the action and the action to the word, and develop a smoothness out of what I'm doing, so that in the very torrent and tempest, and as I may say, whirlwind of your passion, you may acquire and beget a temperance that may give it smoothness. And those are the things that tend to be most, I feel like, pointed out. And then when we get to this section of the monologue, be not too tame neither has a kind of importance within what people discuss. But there's this line right afterwards, which is, but let your own discretion be your tutor, that I feel like is largely ignored. So that that's what I'm talking about here, is that if my attention as I'm speaking whatever I'm speaking is on making sure everybody else understands it, or that I am speaking it correctly, or speaking it and I have all these rules in mind. It's not too much of this, it's not too much of this, as opposed to taking all of that and now trying to internalize it so that I am allowing myself to judge is too strong a word, but listen to myself as I'm speaking. Am I being clear as I'm speaking? And that's the part that I frequently don't see people do. And that is really the main thing that I practice when I'm working, after all of those other rules are in place. So that it's interesting that that whole time, and I'll speak a little bit about a couple of other ideas that I think are important to speaking clearly. That whole time I was convinced that if I could just see Mark Rylance's production, that I would see somebody who solved the issues. Whether or not I solved them that way is a different story. But he, to me, is somebody who every time I've seen him work, always speaks with a certain kind of clarity. I don't particularly agree with the clarity 100% of the time. I might do it differently, but I find him clear, right? He famously said about Speaking Shakespeare that listening to people speak Shakespeare much of the time is like listening to rap in slow motion. And so in a way, I agree with what you're saying, Crystal, and certainly there is a necessity to drive to the end of the thought. And if that's not present, and I only understand what's being said on a phrase by phrase basis, then we start to lose track of the overall thought being spoken, right? So there is a speech that I like to reference when I'm talking about this, which is from Hamlet, which is Polonius's speech to Gertrude and to Claudius. And I'd say that generally speaking, I'm not going to worry about the acting of it. I'm just going to worry about the speaking of it. And I'll come back to what I mean by the distinction in a minute, but I'm not worried about acting at the moment. Generally speaking, you hear people do something along the lines of, "My liege and madam," to expostulate what majesty should be, what duty is, why day is day, night, night, and time is time, were nothing but to waste night, day, and time. Therefore, since brevity is the soul of wit, and tediousness the limbs and outward flourishes, I will be brief. And so generally speaking, people kind of get the joke, and they realize that this is a blowhard and he takes way too long to say what he has to say. But there is nobody, I promise you, that unless they knew the speech, was able to follow that meandering a thought. It demands too much effort on the audience to be trying to hold on to the last phrase and add it to the next phrase, and what are they saying now, and what are we talking about, and you know what I'm saying? Whereas if you have somebody that can simply say, and again, this is without acting, but if they can simply say something like, "My liege and madam, to expostulate what majesty should be, what duty is, why day is day, night, night, and time is time, we're nothing but to waste night, day, and time. Therefore, since brevity is the soul of wit, and tediousness the limbs and outward flourishes, I will be brief." All of a sudden, we start to hear it. It's not that it's great. We're not sitting there like, "Oh, how poetically done." I'm not worried about that part. We start to understand what the full context of thought is. That's the only thing that is important. And we have to start to recognize that, yes, we do need to understand what the individual words mean, but people are not going to get every individual word, nor do we get every individual word, even in life. we frequently say words, and then if asked, well, what does that word mean? And it could be a simple word, you know? And I frequently find that when I'm in class with people and that sort of question is asked of a word that doesn't seem to be particularly difficult, I'm questioning, oh, well, I think it means this, it seems related to this. So that the point I'm making is we don't understand every single word. We understand the context of the words, we understand the general gist of what's being said, even in quote unquote modern English, so that we don't have to go crazy making sure that everybody gets every single word of what we're saying. And in the productions that do, which, you know, many of us are from San Diego, and there's a company in San Diego that does a lot of Shakespeare called the Old Globe. And when I was younger and living there, and I would go see productions there, they made it a point to make appropriate gestures with everything that was said. And I would always feel spoken down to as I was watching, because it's like they're trying to almost mime what they're saying as they're saying it, so that everybody gets every last phrase. And it's just, we have to let go of that kind of a demand in what we're doing.
Okay.
When I talk about the structure of speech, and when I talk about myself looking at various other people to try to figure out how they're dealing with structure related to measure for measure, it's important for us to understand that there are definitive structures that are necessary in terms of the speech itself. So that what I was just talking about, I have to be driving through to the end of the thought, right? That partially means that if I'm an American and have the tendency to go down at the last word of everything I say, not necessarily in speech, but let me just pick up something that I have to read. Okay. Here we go. This is from Wit. The greatest wit, the greatest English poet, some would say, was John Donne. Well, that's a very American thing to do, Donne. So I'm going down at the end of my speech, as opposed to the greatest wit, the greatest English poet, some would say, was John Donne. And now I'm driving through my energy to the end of the line. Well, that needs to happen. That's a basic structure of the speech. If there is imagery involved, I have to be working with that imagery. I can't just speak it as though it doesn't exist. So that if you watch any of the John Barton tapes, and that really primarily is my background in terms of training is an interesting thing to call it. I more watched those tapes religiously from my teens onward and have seen them way too many times. And that's, aside from being in shows and working with people that are knowledgeable, the main background of what I tend to do as a Shakespearean actor. But if you watch those tapes, if you read his book, Playing Shakespeare, he talks about the opening speeches of Merchant of Venice. And so one of the problems that we run into, and this is partially structural, is that you've got a character like Antonio, the merchant, who is obviously melancholy at the top of the play, and there's a tendency for actors to want to infuse the words with the melancholy. Mm-hmm. So the person then says, "In sooth, I know not why I am so sad. It wearies me. You say it wearies you. But how I found it, caught it, came." We don't need all of this, right? Somebody can very simply say that they're sad without any major connection to it. There's a need for people that I've never quite understood, but it has somehow been trained into us as some kind of desire that when I say a word, my emotion should be connected to it. It should be exact, so that if I say I'm angry, I better be angry in that moment. If I say I'm sad, I better be sad in that moment. Rather than I am whatever I am, and I plan all that out in advance so that I understand what's going on with the character, and then I allow myself to speak out of that reality simply and easily without squeezing some kind of emotionality out of myself, right? So that's all important with that kind of a speech. John Barton goes on to the next speech. And I'm not going to go too much further into this. It's just to make an example. So I don't remember whether it's Solario or Solanio. They're almost interchangeable as characters. But right after Antonio says that, whoever it is, one of the salads, that's what they're referred to, says, your mind is tossing on the ocean, there where your argosies with portly sail, ... right? Well, you can't, that's not normal speech. You can't say, oh, your mind is tossing on the ocean, there where your argosies with portly sail. It doesn't make any sense because that's not how we speak. We just don't consider that we actually do speak in modern language and images sometimes. I mean, I was coming up with the most ridiculous example earlier, but I'm just going to go with it because that was what it was in my mind. But if I were to say to somebody, you would never hear this except from some crazy person, but if I were to say to somebody, my love for you is like a fish that I caught that is this big, I don't know. That would be a really weird thing to say. But if I were to say something like that, I would do something along the lines of what I just did. I show how big the fish is, right? I don't try to speak it as though it's some sort of intellectual thing. I'm speaking in the image. You don't ever hear somebody say, oh, I saw this guy. He was this tall, right? Because obviously the speech is referring to an image. It's referring to there's something going on with my body to share with you what's taking place. And the same sort of thing. Your mind is tossing on the ocean. I have to be almost seeing that image and creating that image as I am speaking it. Does that mean that's the entirety of what I do in that speech? No, there's an inner reality going on with the character. There's a situation taking place. I'm trying to get something out of the person who I'm talking to, so it can't just be that I'm now here painting images, but we have to recognize that there are larger demands in Shakespeare than we regularly work with out of theater, and those are that a lot of what we're given are images in which we have to not only speak, but create alongside the intentions of the character. Okay? Now, with all of that said, one of the things that I think you may all, because of your level of knowledge within this already, maybe be able to see, but although there are a lot of strictures of things that do have to be in place, they're not firmly set in stone. Rules can be broken here and there as long as there is a general following of them. And even there, you have people that frequently break the mold. So somebody like Mark Rylance, my issue with Mark Rylance, and I think he's wonderful, and I love watching him. Occasionally, I feel like as much as he does such a wonderful job of speaking thoughts as though they're really happening right now, sometimes I lose track of the larger thought because he's largely speaking in phrases. Now, with that said, I'm still on the journey, so I don't know that I fault him for it. It still occurs to me as being very wonderful. That would just be the next step if I were directing him. That's a very egotistical thing to say. That would be the next step of where I would go with him, is trying to put those things together so that we have the immediacy of understanding as well as the larger thoughts, right? All right. So I've been talking for a while. Are there any questions that have popped up?
I have a question, not for myself, because I know what you're going to say about this, but given that we work together, but I think a lot of people listening and perhaps those here working might want to know where the pentameter meets this discussion that you're having. Okay.
I don't like to talk about pentameter. I mostly don't like to talk about it because I don't find it to be the most useful discussion. I think there are aspects of learning pentameter, iambic pentameter, that are important and useful and can be helpful. But I also see a lot of people that are very stuck in da 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 da, you know, and that becomes its own pattern, and we start to tune out. So I find it more useful as something to go through and understand, but not necessarily something to be working with as an actor. Why is it useful to go through and understand? If you've got one of the examples that's always used in a discussion of pentameter is in Henry V, Henry's speech, once more into the breach, dear friends, once more. And so in that, it breaks the pattern of iambic pentameter, which is a light stress and then a strong stress, a light stress and then a strong stress, right? And instead we have once more, which are two strong stresses, into the breach, dear friends, once more. There are a lot of strong stresses in that sentence. So the things that I can learn from something like that are that it speaks to the emotionality of what's going on with the character. There's obviously, this is a person who's trying to rile up his soldiers to go back into war. The poetry of it is doing that alongside of the words. And so that if you were to come out and be like, once more into the breach, dear friends, once more, it wouldn't work. So that there is a demand that is placed upon that. But with that said, if we understand where the character is coming from, there is a very natural sensibility that we all have to speak that speech with those same stresses. So that we don't necessarily have to know 100% what the stresses are in order to do that. And the other common examples that are used are just in everyday speech. We tend to speak largely in iambic pentameter. We tend to be a strong stress, a light stress, a strong stress, a light stress, strong stress, the other way around. A light stress, a strong stress, a light stress, a strong stress, right? And that's just the closest, especially at the time that Shakespeare was writing, to everyday speech in English that was available. It doesn't cross languages, which is interesting, something that I've learned recently. So if you go to something like French, iambic pentameter doesn't work in French. You have a whole other set of rules. But in English, it's about the closest to everyday speech. There are other things that you can learn if you go through and see the amount of beats in each line. So Aaron is working on The Winter's Tale. In The Winter's Tale especially, you have all sorts of instances where the characters go on to 11, 12, 13 syllables in a line. And that's telling you that there's a lot of crammed thought going on. So it speaks to the psychology of the characters. And so I don't want to downplay it. It's good background work. But in terms of when I'm actually approaching something to say it, if I focus on speaking to the end of the thought, if I focus on speaking so that I understand what I'm saying, those things will largely take care of themselves. And then individual issues can be pointed out. Is that clear for you, Aaron?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Any other questions? All right. So why don't we we'll work with Aaron here for a minute, and then I'll work with everybody else after that, so that you'll have the example of watching her work as well. All right. So Aaron, will you spotlight yourself so we can all see you?
Sure. Spotlight myself. That's going to be weird.
Well, I would just, if I were you, what I tend to do in this situation is I put anything else in front of the screen so that I don't have to look.
See. I wonder if I can also pin your video. Am I spotlighted?
Yeah.
Still?
Yeah.
Well, then there's a Zoom like trick for you. I just pinned your video, so I'm just watching you watch me now. So good.
Oh, that's not self-conscious at all. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Go
Well, that
ahead.
way I can get your feedback and I can actually be watching you bigly
Oh, I understand.
instead of littly. What would you like?
Why don't you just be where you are with your piece,
Okay.
and then we'll talk about it afterwards.
All right. So I'm focusing more on the text than the acting. But since what I am to say must be that which contradicts my accusation, and the testimony on my part no other but what comes from myself, it shall scarce boot me to say not guilty. Mine integrity, being counted falsehood, shall, as I express it, be so received. But thus, if powers divine behold our human actions as they do, I doubt not then, but innocence shall make false accusation blush, and tyranny tremble at patience. You, my lord, best know who least will seem to do so. My past life hath been as continent, as chaste, as true as I am now unhappy, which is more than history can pattern, though devised and played to take spectators. For behold me, a fellow of the royal bed, which owe a moiety of the throne, a great king's daughter, the mother to a hopeful prince, here standing to prate and talk for life and honor for who please to come and hear. For life I prize it as I weigh grief, which I would spare. For honor, 'tis a derivative from me to mine, and only that I stand for. I appeal to your own conscience, sir, before Polixenes came to your court, how I was in your grace, how merited to be so. Since he came, with what encounter so uncurrent have I strained to appear thus? If one jot beyond the bound of honor, or an act or will, that way inclining, hardened be the hearts of all that hear me, and my nearest of kin cry fie upon my grave.
Okay. Very good. How did that go for you?
Well, again, I was working on speaking simply. I was focused on emphasizing any antithesis that I found in the text. I was reminded, as you had spoken earlier, about the imagery. And so with her speaking a lot about myself and then someone else really trying to physically embody that so that I could create the imagery as I spoke. That's what I was working on. And I felt that I was achieving that for the most part throughout.
Okay. Very good. I want to go through it with you. I'm going to pull something up, so just hold on one second. All right. So what I'm doing here, it's sort of a controversial thing that I do in the way that I work. Why don't we just take this off of the spotlight so that everybody can see us both?
Okay.
All right. I really suggest to people, really no matter their level of proficiency with Shakespeare, to work with a text that is a modern text as well. It's reductive in nature. So that I'm going to have Aaron work, and I'm going to put it up on the screen so that we can all see it in a minute, with No Fear.
Okay. Do you want me to look it up on my device?
I just pulled it up, so
okay.
I'll find it. Can you just tell me, because I don't have it off the top of my head, that's what, 3-2, is that right?
3-2, and it's from line 23.
Okay, very good. That just allows me to get to it quickly. Okay. So let's just work with the first little bit here, and I will share my screen in a second. But I just want to point out that, yes, it's reductive to be working with something like No Fear. So as we look at this, what we're going to see in terms of the modern translation is not everything that's possible in the text. but it boils it down to a kind of simplicity to allow us to connect to the simple meaning of each thing. And then we can start to layer in the more complex meanings in a minute. So let me pull this up here. All right. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Okay. So why don't, Aaron, why don't you read just the modern text?
Okay. Since what I'm going to say must contradict this accusation, and the only testimony in my favor comes from me, it hardly helps to say not guilty. I'm believed to be a liar, so whatever I say will be considered false. But if the gods watch what we humans do, I don't doubt that innocence will win out against the false accusation and tyranny. You, my lord, know that my past life has been faithful, pure, and true, though you seem to know this least of anyone. Those qualities are now matched by my unhappiness, which is greater than history has ever seen, even if it were created and performed to enthrall an audience. Look at me, who has slept in the royal bed, who owns part of the throne as the daughter of a great king, the mother of the prince who will one day take the throne, forced to defend my life and my honor in front of anyone who cares to come and hear. I care as much for life as I do for grief, which I could do without. Honor, though, is passed down from me to my children, so I will make a stand for that. I appeal to your conscience to remember how you held me in good graces before Polixenes came to court, and how I deserve to be regarded so. Since he came to court, think of what was so unacceptable about my behavior that I now appear on trial. If I have acted in any way dishonorably, or even seemed inclined to do so, may all that hear me harden their hearts, and may even my closest relatives curse my grave.
So is there anything that stuck out to you reading that?
Yes, let me pull out my text.
Text
One thing that I did not hear in my monologue was, which is greater than history has ever seen, related to my unhappiness, even if it were created and performed to enthrall an audience. I didn't know that was there. Let's see what else. I think that was the thing that stuck out to me.
Great. So I'm just going to keep this up because we're working with it. But what I want you to do now is do something. I'm just going to ask you to exercise in the manner that I exercise. So again, at the moment, we're putting acting aside. Acting can be layered into this. We're not here to be working on acting. We're here to be working on simply speaking the text clearly, which then can influence what we do when we add behavior to it, right? Now, with that said, I find a personal necessity to almost overplay things initially. This doesn't mean that everybody has to do this, but I personally don't concern myself with whether or not things are naturalistic, realistic, believable. It's absolutely not important to me when I'm simply trying to understand what's being said. So in this, there is a kind of necessity when I'm going through the text itself to work with what seem to be the necessary sizes of each part of the dialogue. So to give you an example of what I'm talking about, if I were preparing the role of King Lear and I were working on the storm scene, I might feel a need to be cursing at the elements, at the gods, and screaming at the blow winds and crack your cheeks, all of that. When I get to performance, I personally don't have a view of King Lear as doing that. I personally see him as like praying for death almost in that moment. So it seems to me to be, in my sensibilities of it, a much quieter moment. But as I'm learning how to put the text together, I'm not concerned with that element of it. I'm only concerned with, can I make this speech work, right? So that I would give into the freedom of whatever seems to be necessary to get across these thoughts. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So why don't you go through it? And I don't want you to go through it the whole way. When I say that, I also don't necessarily want you to stop. I want you to speak, and then if you run into an area where you don't understand what you're saying, where you don't understand completely what you're saying, to go over and reference the part next to it, if you can make the other thing carry a similar meaning. So we'll be watching you work with the text. We won't necessarily get the monologue from top to bottom. That part's not important. You understand?
Yeah.
Very good.
Right. Since what I am to say must be but that which contradicts my accusation, and the testimony on my part no other but what comes from myself, shall scarce boot me to say not guilty. Mine integrity being counted falsehood, shall, as I express it, be so received.
All right, so let's pause there for a second. So that's all one thought.
Okay.
But right now it works for you as two thoughts.
Right. I thought you were saying pause between sentences. Sorry.
I'm saying pause. No. I'm saying go through it. And if you notice that there's a thought that that's not making sense to you, then go over and read what the modern translation has to say and come back and see if you can apply it. But that doesn't mean stop after every thought. Try to push through to each thought. So similarly to what I was saying, just for everybody else, because I think I'm speaking a little bit in shorthand because I know Aaron. Similarly to what I was doing with the Polonius monologue, we're trying to push through to the end of the thought, which is we'll know that's happening because there's a period there. Okay.
Yeah. Since what I am to say must be but that which contradicts my accusation, and the testimony on my part no other but what comes from myself, it shall scarce boot me to say not guilty. Mine integrity being counted falsehood shall, as I express it, be so received. But thus, if powers divine behold our human actions as they do, I doubt not then but innocence shall make false accusation blush, and tyranny tremble at patience. You, my lord, best know whom least will seem to do so. My past life hath been as continent, as chaste, as true as I am now unhappy, which is more than history can pattern, though devised and played to take spectators. For behold me, a fellow of a royal bed, which owe a moiety of the throne, a great king's daughter, the mother to a hopeful prince, here standing to prate and talk for life and honor for to... Let me try that again. For behold me, a fellow of the royal bed, which owe a moiety of the throne, a great king's daughter, the mother to a hopeful prince, here standing to prate and talk for life and honor for who pleased to come in here.
So what did you just say there?
I'm saying my history as, so I sleep in the bed, the royal bed, which I'm already owed because I'm the daughter of a great king. I'm a mother to a hopeful prince. Now I'm standing in front of you and basically like prostrating myself for anyone who's going to come listen. It's just embarrassing. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, if you'll notice in this sentence, you only reference what you just said. So in the sentence you were just saying, to explain your thought, you said the word me or myself or something along those lines 6 or 7 times. In this sentence you're only given that word once. So there's a necessity to emphasize that so that we know what the subject of the sentence is. You know?
Yeah, so that me is connected to a fellow of the royal bed, a great king's daughter, the mother, here, standing, yeah.
Exactly. Otherwise what happens, I mean, even to start, is my association, just personally, with the word fellow is I'm wondering immediately, who are you talking about?
Am I a boy?
Right? So, and that's the thing that which can easily start to happen when words are used differently than we're used to, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go back and do that sentence again.
For behold me, a fellow of the royal bed, which owe a moiety of the throne, a great king's daughter, the mother to a hopeful prince, here standing to prate and talk for life and honor, for who to please to come and hear.
What does that mean, that last part? For who pleased? Oh, not for who to please, for who pleased to come in here.
Yeah, for who pleased to come in here. Oh, I switched to to and please. Yeah, okay.
All right. And who is that?
Everyone, everybody, all of the council, all of the government.
Everybody who's here right now.
Yes.
Great. So there's a distinction then. You're talking about you, and then you're talking about everybody here.
Yes.
You see?
Yes.
So go back and do that one more time.
For behold me, a fellow of the royal bed, which owe a moiety of the throne, a great king's daughter, the mother to a hopeful prince, here standing to prate and talk for life and honor, for who to please to come and hear.
Again, it's just who.
I did it again. Who to please.
No, but it's okay. Right. I understood what you were saying this time.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Yeah.
Okay. Keep going.
For life, I prize it as I weigh grief, which I would spare. For honor, 'tis a derivative from me to mine, and only that I stand for. Sorry, did you say something?
No, did that make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay.
I appeal to your own conscience, sir. Before Polixenes came to your court, how was I in your grace? How merited to be so? And since he came, with what encounter so uncurrent I have strained to appear thus? If one jot beyond the bond of honor, or an act, or a will that way inclining, hardened be the hearts of all that hear me, and my nearest of kin can cry fie upon my grave.
So I got a little lost there.
Yeah.
So let's see. So what's happening there? Go over to the other. Here. Let's see. Where does this sentence start?
Yes, it's I appeal to your conscience to remember how you held me in good graces before Polixenes came to court. And how I deserve to be regarded so since he came to court. Think of what was so unacceptable about my behavior that I now appear on trial. If I have acted in any way dishonorably or even seemed inclined to do so, may all that hear me harden their hearts, and may even my closest relatives curse my grave.
Okay, so just to simplify this, there are like three concepts going on, right? There's you and your behavior.
Yeah.
There's him and how he thinks of you, his conscience, right? And there's the people and their responses to that.
Yeah.
Right? So those all have to be clarified in this speech.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, go ahead.
I appeal to your own conscience, sir. Before Polixenes came to your court, how I was in your grace, how merited to be so. Since he came, with what encounter so uncurrent have I strained to appear thus? If one jot beyond the bond of honor, or an act, or a will of that way inclining, hardened be the hearts of all that hear me, and my nearest of kin cry fie upon my grave.
Okay, good. The next step would be to, so what is this sentence about?
Do you mean what's happening?
Like, what's the theme being discussed in this sentence?
I'm not sure what how I understand your meaning. Like, what's the theme?
Okay, how about what is the point of the sentence? What point is she trying to make?
Well, she's looking for evidence. Like, give me the evidence. And if you can provide the evidence, great. I will be the first person to, say I'm terrible and you have every right to treat me this way, essentially. Or even worse, like cry fie upon my grave, like kill me now. Okay. I mean, I know they're already saying she's going to be put to death, but.
And go back and read the other version really quickly.
I appeal to your conscience to remember how you held me in your good graces before Polixenes came to court. So I'm appealing to his conscience, which I guess I wasn't doing.
And so that's the part that gets lost.
Yeah.
Right? so that you're not asking for evidence, you're pointing out the evidence and appealing to his conscience in front of these people here. Sorry.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So one more time.
I appeal to your own conscience, sir. Before Polixenes came to your court, how I was in your grace, how merited to be so. Since he came, with what encounter so incurrent I have strained to appear thus. If one jot be on the bound of honor, or in act or will that way inclining, hardened be the hearts of all that hear me, and my nearest of kin cry fie upon my grave.
Great. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. So that's like the basic way that I would suggest anyone starts working on any monologue that is a Shakespeare monologue, right? So to reiterate, what we want to do is we want to read through wherever we're finding difficulty to go to some other version of the text. Now, I may not have this opportunity available to me. If I were working on a play like Timon of Athens, it's a little harder to find a text that is a modern version of the text. You can still find them. I suggest that just because, especially for how long I personally have been working on Shakespeare, there are a lot of things that I think I understand, and then I read somebody else's translation and I go, whoa, what are you talking about? And very frequently I'm like, oh, I can see what they're talking about, and it's something that I've just completely avoided. And so like a whole sentence won't make sense because I have an assumption of, oh, I get that. And so I find it personally to be very useful to do that. And especially as we were seeing in this last sentence, even the structure of what's going on may be different than the one that is initially impacting to us as we're reading, right? Mm-hmm. So that, yes, we don't have time for you to go through the monologue again, nor is it particularly important because you'd have to hold on to all of these things where they need to be practiced and worked on. But as you were doing that, and as we were watching you do that, we got an opportunity to see you make sense out of all of those things. And as you were reading, the difference between your initial presentation of thought, which I couldn't follow, it was quite striking in this last version, which all of a sudden everything was very clear to be understood. Was it every nuance? No. But that would be what to add next to this sort of basis of discussion, where as compared with what tends to happen with actors, where they dig down into each individual word, but the thought never becomes the focus. The thought has to be the focus, almost as with acting, it's as if it were so. I have to be always as if it were so. I have to be always under the larger realm of communication, and then I can define more completely individual words and phrases to have more than one meaning, which many do have some sort of double entendre going on, especially with Shakespeare, right?
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. Who wants to go next? Actually, why don't I call upon somebody to go next, since I already have the script up and I can get to it easily. So Ken, since you're working on The Winter's Tale, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I didn't know such a thing exists, so I've got both versions on my phone now.
Oh, great.
I didn't know the Spark Notes thing existed. We used to have to write that stuff whenever we got one of the parts. We had to bring it in contemporary language.
Yeah.
Always. Now they do it for you, huh? What can I do for you, sir?
It helps to do it yourself too, but since we have that, we may as well use it. It's a nice tool.
Sure.
Why don't we just have you do the monologue as you understand it right now, without worrying about the modern version?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Come, poor babe. I have heard but not believed the spirits of the dead may walk again. If such things be, thy mother appeared to me last night, for near was dream so like a waking. To me comes a creature, sometimes her head on one side, some another. I never saw a vessel of like sorrow, so filled and so becoming. In pure white robes, like very sanctity, did she approach me. did she approach me in my cabin where I lay, thrice bowed before me, and gasping to begin some speech, her eyes became two spouts. The fury spent, anon did this break from her. Good Antigonus, since fate against thy better disposition hath made thy person for the thrower out of my poor babe, according to thine oath, places remote enough are in Bohemia. There weep and leave it crying. And for the babe is counted lost forever, perdita, I pray thee call it. For this ungentle business put up on thee by my lord, thou ne'er shalt see thy wife Paulina more. So, with shrieks, she melted into air. Affrighted much, I did in time collect myself, and thought this was so, and no slumber. Dreams are toys, yet for this once, yea, superstitiously, I will be squared by this. I do believe Hermione hath suffered death, and that Apollo would, this being indeed the issue of King Polixenes, it should be here laid either for life or death upon the earth of its right father. Blossom, speed thee well. There lie, and there thy character, there these, which may, if fortune please, both breed thee pretty and still rest thine. The storm begins, poor wretch, that for thy mother's fault are thus exposed to loss and what may follow. Weep I cannot, but my heart bleeds, and most accursed am I to be by oath enjoined to this. Farewell. The day frowns more and more. Thou'rt like to have a lullaby, too rough. I never saw the heavens so dim by day. A savage clamor. Well may I get aboard. This is the chase. I am gone forever. Yeehaw.
That's great. All right. Thank you. Okay.
Got into it a little bit, huh?
That's great.
It's better than believing that you know the lines and not feeling comfortable doing it that way, you know, all the way through. It has a certain pace to it.
Mm-hmm. How did that go for you?
It felt swimming. It felt like I was on a track and I couldn't let go of whatever was going to happen. I know it well, but you're going to probably show me how well I might not know it. And that's what I'm looking for.
Okay. Very good.
I mean, there's a lot of drama, as you can imagine, for an audition monologue. If you come in costume, man, you could, with a baby and a sling over your, you could have a blast.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like a play unto itself.
It is. It's a great monologue.
Yeah, it's a man skeptical of dreams talking about a dream he had and using that to convince himself that what he's doing is right.
Okay.
How's that?
That's good. All right, so let me just, Aaron, can you take the spotlight off?
Oh, please do. I hate to look at myself. Thanks.
Right. So I'm going to share my screen. You may also have this on, I'm not sure, but I've pulled it up so that we can all see it as you're working at the very least. So if you have it pulled up on your own version, you're welcome to just use yours or use mine that's here.
Yours is easier to read, actually. Thanks.
Great.
Yeah.
So why don't we just have you just read the modern version? And again, I'm not worried about the reality of what's going on. If that happens, it happens, fine. But we're just focused on the clarity of it.
Thank you. Okay. Come, poor child. I've heard but never believed that the spirits of the dead might walk the earth. But perhaps it is true, because last night your mother appeared to me, and no dream ever seems so real. She comes to me with her head to one side or the other, and I've never seen anyone so filled with sorrow and so beautiful. Dressed in pure white robe, she came to my room where I was resting. She bowed 3 times to me, and struggling to speak, she broke into tears. Once her fury was spent, these words came out. Good Antigonus, since fate against your good nature has chosen you to cast out my child according to your oath, leave her in the remote places of Bohemia. There you weep and leave the child crying. Since she is lost forever, I ask you to call her Perdita. Because of this terrible business forced upon you, you will never see your wife, Paulina, again. And then she disappeared, shrieking. Very frightened, I finally got myself together and decided it had truly happened and wasn't a dream. Dreams are just trifles, but for this once, even if it's superstition, I'll be ruled by one. I believe that Hermione has died and that this child is truly the child of King Polixenes, so Apollo would want her to be left, whether to life or death, on the land of her real father. Blossom, fare you well. Lie there, and I'll put an account of your parentage with you. These jewels and gold will help pay for your upbringing, and if fortune pleases, leave some left over for you. The storm is beginning, but my heart bleeds, and I'm cursed for having to do this deed.
You missed
Farewell.
The storm is beginning, poor child.
Sorry, where am I? The storm is beginning, poor child. Because of your mother's transgression, you were left out to die. I can't weep, but my heart bleeds, and I'm cursed for having to do this deed. Farewell. The day gets worse and worse. You are likely to be lulled to sleep with a tough lullaby. I've never seen the day look so dark during the day. What a savage noise. I'll be lucky to get on board. This is the hunt. I'm gone forever.
Okay, very good. So what, if anything, sticks out to you after having read the first one and then now this version?
The story of the dream became clearer, certainly, I believe, and also the laying down of the child became clearer in my mind, I believe.
Great. So we're not going to go through the whole thing. It's a long monologue, but let's just get started and go back and forth. And so when I mean that, what I'm going to ask you to do is work very much the same way that Aaron was working, so that you're going to start at Come Poor Babe and go through to the first period, which I'm trying to figure out where that is. Where is that? Oh my gosh, that is a far way away there, isn't it?
So like a waking. For near was dream, so like a waking.
Good. Okay, yeah, you're right. Okay. And then the next sentence is really long too. Okay. So you're just going to go and push through the end of the thought.
Yes.
And if it doesn't make sense to you, then you're going to go over and look at the other text and see if you can work with it, right?
Okay.
All right.
Come, poor babe. I have heard, but not believe the spirits of the dead may walk again. If such things be, thy mother appeared to me last night, for near was dream, so like a waking.
That's near, by the way.
Near. What did I'm sorry, did I say near?
You said near.
Near, okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. So let's have you do that one more time, but without the pauses.
All right. Come, poor babe, I have heard but not believed the spirits of the dead may walk again. If such things be, thy mother appeared to me last night, for near was dream, so like a waking.
For near was dream, so like a waking.
Near. I'll practice that. It's probably just an old habit. Near. I'll learn that.
Okay.
Thank you.
And the reason is because it's never.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, it's just a pronunciation you're correcting. Thank you. Yeah.
So the next thing that we would want you to do with that, so one thing that you were doing wonderfully before is that you were really saying the individual sentences, right? So you were saying, come, poor babe. I have heard, but not believed. This, right? And so on. And then when I asked you to push through to the end of the thought, you removed what was going so wonderfully before to sort of by rote, come poor babe, I have heard but not believed the spirits that, you see what I'm saying?
I certainly do, and that's what I thought you were asking for.
I want you to do both, right?
Oh.
And the reason for it is that we don't talk in punctuation, right? So what happens when you talk in those sort of phrases like that is, yes, I follow it, but I don't follow the larger thought, right? So punctuation is something that is really only used as a writer's device to convey meaning so that we understand what's going on.
Understood.
Very good. But we do still talk with an understanding of punctuation because, and that's exactly what you were doing. So see if you can put both of those concepts together so that you're still pushing through to the end of the thought, but you're also allowing yourself to really say everything.
Really say, okay, okay. Poor babe. I have heard but not believed the spirits of the dead may walk again. If such things be, thy mother appeared to me last night, for near was dream, so like a waking.
Very good. Keep going.
To me comes a creature, sometimes her head on one side, some another. I never saw a vessel of like sorrow, so filled and so becoming in pure white robes. Very sanctity she did approach my cabin where I lay. Thrice bowed it before me, and gasping to begin some speech, her eyes became two spouts. The fury spent anon did this break from her. Good Antigonus, since fate against thy better disposition hath made thy person for the thrower out of my poor babe, according to thine oath, places remote enough are in Bohemia. There weep and leave it crying, and for the babe is counted lost forever. Perdita, I pray thee, call it. Okay. For this ungentle business put on thee by thy Lord, but thou...
Okay. I'm having you stop just because you got to a period.
Thank you.
Right? Okay. So that's a long sentence. Right?
It's a breathing exercise.
So what would you say is the main subject of the sentence?
Are we talking about starting Good Antigonus or before?
Good Antigonus is only what was said to you.
Right.
The beginning of the sentence is, to me comes a creature, sometimes her head on, yeah.
I'm not sure of the question, so I'll just take a chance. It's sort of like the ghost of a dead woman wanting revenge and giving instructions.
Okay, good. So what do you think is most important for us to know in order to be able to follow that thought?
My personal resentment of what I've been tasked to do.
Okay.
Or my disbelief in what I'm hearing. There are several options, I think.
So those are both related to the acting.
Okay.
So purely related to structure, what do we need to understand in order to follow what you're saying?
That I'm describing a dream and a speech that I'm a speech that I'm recounting.
Okay, and what device in here gives that to us?
Thus did this break from her, or something like that. Thus did this break from her. Did this, so, and gasping becomes some speech, her eyes became like two spouts, and the fury spent anon did this break from her. Quote, good Antigonus. So there, I think that's where we need to be.
That part's important. Okay. So we don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to point out a couple of things.
Okay.
So I agree with you that the dream part is important to this piece even. And the dream part does not exist in this sentence. So that tells us that in the prior sentence, that the word dream is particularly important. Because we need to understand from that word that that is what you'll be speaking about for quite a while. Right? Furthermore, this sentence is not describing the dream. It's describing the creature. and what the creature does and says, right?
Oh, yeah. I was talking about the next sentence, but yes, I understand where you are now. Go ahead, please.
What do you mean the next sentence?
I was describing the part from good Antigonus forward, not the part prior to that.
That's right. But you recognize that's all the same sentence, right?
Yeah, and I was describing it as in essence, recounting what was said in a dream. That's what I was referring to. You were referring to an earlier sentence. That's all I'm saying. So I wasn't referring to that one. So
let me see. You know what? I'm going to look at something.
Sure.
In your version of the script, do you have periods more frequently than after so like waking? And then the next period that I can see in here, at least in this version I'm looking at online that you see before you as well, is call it. I prithee call it is the next period. Correct?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. So in our conversation, what keeps happening is you're looking at these like they're 3 separate sentences, but in reality, they're 2 separate sentences.
I'm there.
Right?
I do. I fully understand now. Fully understand.
So now, yes, I understand what you're saying, that good Antigonus, that part of it was a sentence spoken to you. Right?
So yes.
In effect, there are 3 sentences here, but they're not 3 of your sentences. That sentence is contained within Antigonus's sentence, right?
Understood, yes.
Okay.
Understood.
So what I need to know, even to understand that sentence, is to know that creature is essentially what is being described the whole time, so that you are defining this creature, right? So let's have you go through it one more time and really emphasize that word, but also use everything you're saying to further define that creature and what the creature was doing and saying. You understand?
I do. To me comes a creature, sometimes her head on one side, some another. I never saw a vessel of like sorrow so filled and so becoming, in pure white robes, like very sanctity. She did approach my cabin where I lay, thrice bowed before me, and gasping to begin some speech. Her eyes became like 2 spouts. Their fury spent anon, did this break from her. Good Antigonus, since fate against thy better disposition hath made thy person for the thrower out of my poor babe, according to thine oath, places remote enough or in Bohemia, there weep and leave it crying, and for the babe is counted lost forever. Perdita, I pray thee, call it.
Okay, very good. So that was much clearer. I still think it can go a little further, so that now that we understand that creature is the subject of this sentence, if you will, and everything in the sentence further defines it, we have to really use it to construct the sentence that way. So that I say something like, to me comes a creature, sometimes her head on one side, so that everything is defining the creature, and that I'm really emphasizing that word so that the audience essentially understands that that is the subject of my sentence, right? And then when I get down here, it's also important when I say, anon did this break from her, that I stress this, because I'm introducing the following thought. Anon did this break from her. And then you see?
I do.
So that would be the next step to be working with. So as you're continuing to work with this speech, I would suggest you work with these individual sentences, that you go back and forth with this other modern version. If you feel like putting it into your own words as well, then great. But really be attentive to exactly which sentence structure you're given, where it ends, and how do I make that whole thought work together as one thought, right?
I do.
Very good work.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. All right, Crystal. Let's see, I'll stop sharing my screen and then Aaron can share, spotlight you, and then as the same thing, if you want to cover up the screen so you're not watching yourself, maybe that's helpful.
All right.
All right.
All right. Totally pulling this out of my ass here. Here we go. All right. Now might I do it, Pat. Now he is praying, and now I'll do it. And so he goes to heaven, and so I am revenged. That would be scanned. A villain kills my father, and for that I, his sole son, do the same villain send to heaven. Ah, this is hire and salary, not revenge. He took my father grossly, full of bread, with all his crimes broad blown, flush as May. And how his audit stands, who knows, save heaven? But in our circumstances and course of thought, 'tis heavy with him. And am I then revenged to take him in the purging of his soul when he is fit and seasoned for his passage? No. Up sword, and know thou a more horrid hint. When he is drunk asleep, or in his rage, or in the incestuous pleasure of his bed, or at game, a swearing, or about some act that has no relish for salvation in it, then trip him, that his heels may kick at heaven, and that his soul may be as damned and black as hell whereto he goes.
Great. How was that?
Good. I mean, I think this is a lot simpler monologue to connect the ideas than the two you've been working with. Those have been very meaty and very complex, and this feels more simple, but I was really enjoying, as I was kind of breaking it down, I was enjoying how he how his thoughts come to him and how he keeps kind of distracting himself from the thought at hand. And so, and I was really seeing that in just how it was metered in the text, and so that was interesting.
Cool.
So I don't know, I was just kind of playing with that.
Let's, Aaron, do you mind taking the spotlight off for a moment, and I'll share my screen here? Okay. Can you all see this?
Mm-hmm.
All right. It looks like we're gonna be jumping back and forth between pages, but we'll deal with that issue in a second. Why don't we just go ahead and have you read the modern version? That's the version on the right.
Okay. I could do it easily now. He's praying now, and now I'll do it. And there he goes off to heaven, and that's my revenge. Okay, so yeah, and there he goes off to heaven, and that's my revenge. I'd better think about this more carefully. A villain kills my father, and I, my father's son, send the same villain to heaven. Seems like I just did him a favor. He killed my father when my father was enjoying life, and with all his sins full blown, before my father could repent for any of them. Only God knows how many sins my father has to pay for. As for me, I don't think his prospects look so good. And then, so is it really revenge for me if I kill Claudius right when he is confessing his sins, in perfect condition for a trip to heaven? No. Away sword and wait for a better moment to kill him. When he's sleeping off some drunken orgy, or having incestuous sex, or swearing while he's gambling, or committing some other act that has no goodness about it, that's when I'll trip him up and send him to hell with his heels kicking up at heaven. And I stop there.
Okay. So what, if anything, do you notice from that? Was there anything surprising?
Well, this monologue has always been really weird to me because it feels so intellectualized in a moment that appears to have a lot of rage and energy and you know, this murderous rage in it, and it's so intellectualized. He's thinking about it, so I mean it's still like these sparks that are coming, and it's oh wait, there's that, and oh wait, there's that. So he's not thinking really clearly, but he's working it through. But I find it interesting that he takes the time to work it through in a moment when he should be pulled just by the rage and the emotion of the moment.
And what tells you that he's not pulled that way?
It's hard to explain. No, I mean, I do think there's emotion involved. Don't get me wrong. I don't think it's without, but what am I trying to say? Well, just the fact that he could stop himself when he's in that moment so close, and it's such a easy. It would be easy to kill Claudio. It's an easy hit. He feels justified. He's got the opportunity, and so the fact that he could stop himself, I don't know. I find it very odd.
Well, there are a couple of interesting things that you bring up, and we may as well discuss them since you're talking about them, and then we'll go back to the text itself.
All right. Yeah.
But I mean, just keep in mind that this is not. This has got to be the worst casting in the world for a revenge play. You know, you take a philosopher and put this philosopher in a revenge plot. Right. And so the whole play is philosophizing.
True. Yeah.
Right? So it's not out of character that he's like this. We have a whole monologue about suicide earlier than this. Mm-hmm. We have monologues about all kinds of things. And I think that one of the things going on with Hamlet throughout the play is that he seems to think, or she in your case, seems to think that if there's just a kind of certainty, then it'll be easier to kill somebody. If it's just certain that they're in the wrong. But we learn in this monologue that there's really more to it than that. That if Hamlet kills Claudius at this moment, then it's not actually vindication, because Claudius is in the is repenting, mm-hmm. which is something that Hamlet's father, the King Hamlet, never had the ability to do. Right. And that's an interesting problem that gets introduced. So that what needs to take place here is really philosophizing about that idea. Because it's not just about killing Claudius. The play is about vindicating King Hamlet. And about setting things right. So that there's much more than just revenge going on. It's about really making the world make sense again, making the kingdom work again, where there's been so much destruction to that concept at the moment. So let's have you spend a couple of minutes and read it, and if there's anything both within that concept that becomes difficult, see if you can go back to the other version and play with it. And just keep in mind that you're presenting not necessarily a stream of thought, but an argument. So that Hamlet is in argument with Hamlet in this moment.
Now might I do it, Pat. Now he is praying, and now I'll do it. And so he goes to heaven. And so I am revenged. That would be scanned. A villain kills my father, and I for that, his sole son, do the same villain send to heaven. Oh, this is higher in salary, not revenge. He took my father grossly, full of bread, with all his soul's broad blown, as flesh as May. And how his audit stands, who knows, save heaven? But in our circumstance and course of thought, 'tis heavy with him. And am I then revenged to take him in the purging of his soul when he is fit and seasoned for his passage? No. Up sword, and know thou a more horrid end. When he is drunk asleep, or in his rage, or in the incestuous pleasure of his bed, at game, a swearing, or about some act that has no relish of salvation in it, then trap him, that his heels may kick at heaven, and that his soul may be as damned and black as hell whereto it goes. I don't know. Got more acting that time.
Well, I'm not worried about that. There was a lot more clarity that time, so that I started to see the argument. We're not concerned with the acting. That's a separate discussion. There are only a couple of things that I want to point out, so that when you said up sword and know thou a more horrid hent, I didn't quite have a sense of what you were meaning as you were saying that, partially because you went down at the end of the line. So know thou a more horrid hent.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
We have a better moment to kill him, so it is a horrid hent.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
A better place, a better time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then this next sentence, it was clear, but in the same way that I was speaking the Polonius monologue earlier, it required a little bit of the audience to hold on to the thoughts. So I keep in mind that from when he is drunk asleep down to where to it goes is all one concept, where Hamlet is jumping back between this and then this and then this and then this and then that's going to get it, you know? So that would be the next step to work with in this monologue. All right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Very good. But it was definitely much clearer, and we got to see the argument once we had that discussion there. Okay?
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you. Will.
Nope.
All right. Let's see what you've got. Aaron, do you mind spotlighting him?
I know you all and will a while uphold the unyoked humor of your idleness. Yet herein I will imitate the sun, that doth permit the base contagious clouds to smother up his beauty from the world, yet when he please again to be himself, by breaking through the, oh, I'm sorry, I've gotten lost. I'm gonna start over and read. I haven't done this in too long.
Well, yeah, don't worry about the acting. Just read. That's fine.
Yeah. I know you all, and will a while uphold the unyoked humor of your idleness. Yet herein I will imitate the sun, who doth permit the base, contagious clouds to cover up his beauty from the world, that when he please again to be himself, being wanted, he may be more wondered at by breaking through the foul and ugly mists of vapors that did seem to strangle him. If all the year were playing holidays, to sport would be as tedious as to work, but when they seldom come, they wished for come, and nothing pleaseth but rare accidents. So when this loose behavior I throw off and pay back the debt I never promised, by how much better than my word I am, by so much shall I falsify men's hopes, and like bright metal on a sullen ground, my reformation glittering or my fault shall show more goodly and attract more eyes than that which hath no foil to set it off. I'll so offend to make offense a skill, redeeming time when men think least I will.
Great. How did that go? Also, remind me which scene that is.
I believe 1-2.
1-2. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
trying to find it.
Yeah, 1-2. It's the very end of the scene.
Yep.
Pretty well. I think I was maybe sort of illustrating a little too much some of the time. In terms of gesture, that some of that could have been a little bit more easy. And the same sort of problem that I run into with this regularly is still popping up, which is that I don't quite know. Like, I understand what I am communicating, I understand what I am saying, but I don't quite. It doesn't quite come from anywhere. I think maybe is what it is. That like I don't quite have a connection to what's being said.
Okay. That's almost a different. Are you saying you don't have a? When you say you understand what you're saying, but you don't have a connection, you don't have a personal connection to the character and the character's circumstances, or is that what you're saying?
No, because I do have that.
Okay.
I feel like I understand this character's feeling, and their background and the situation even that we're in, but I don't. When I get into it, it doesn't feel like.
I see. So it sounds to me like you're saying you don't understand how the thought creates how the thought comes out of the situation and works together. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. So let's look over at the
No fear.
No fear. Aaron, can you take the thing off again and I'll share my screen? All right. So let's just have you read the no fear really quickly. And obviously I'm going to have to go to the next page, so just be patient.
No way.
So it's on the right here. I understand all of you.
Mm-hmm. I understand all of you. For now I'll put on the rowdy behavior of your good-for-nothing ways. But in this way, I'll be like the sun, who allows the vulgar, corrupting clouds to hide his beauty from the world. Then, when the sun wants to be himself again, he breaks through the foul mists and vapors that seemed to be strangling him. And because people have missed him so much, they're that much more impressed when he finally appears. If every day were a vacation, playing would grow as tedious as working, but when it's rare, it's looked forward to. Nothing is as precious as the unexpected occurrence. So when I throw off this wild behavior and accept the responsibilities of being king, a destiny I didn't choose but was born into, I'll suddenly seem like a far better man. In this way, I'll give everyone the wrong expectation of me. Like a bright metal on a dark background, my reformation will shine even more brilliantly when it's set against my wicked past. I'll be so wild, I'll make wildness an art form, and then I'll redeem myself when the world least expects me to.
Okay. So is there anything that sticks out to you?
Yes. It's I think I see what's getting in my way. Mm-hmm. There's a character quality that I've been assuming, which is that there's a sort of show to this moment. That it's either already been a plan, or that it's like that there's kind of like a showman in Hal, that I've been assuming and playing with this whole time, and I think maybe it's like some of that. Let me see. Can you go to the next page, actually? Sorry. Yeah. It's, I've lost it again. something clicked. And it was near this. If every day were a vacation, it would grow as tedious as working. It's something about it started to feel genuine.
Yeah. So I think one of the things to apply, and just based on what you're saying, it's always a good idea to approach any sort of speech. And I'm going to take it off of this because we're running out of time, and I just want to spend a minute giving you a direction as to where to go from where you currently are. So I'm just going to stop, and you'll all be able to see me talking. So I think we generally want to approach any speech that we have as though the character is coming up with the thought for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even right now, I have spoken this thought many times, but I have to come up with it in this context right now. So just because I've understood it before, I have to re-understand it on a basis of every time I go to speak it. In the same way, the character may have had this in mind, but this is the first way and the first time the character has voiced it like this. Otherwise, we'd have something like, well, as I always say, no, but we don't have that. The character is understanding how to deal in this moment.
Right. I'm doing the thing where I solve my character's problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, within the structure of the sentence, it's just important to recognize that he's talking about himself. Then he talks about himself as the son and carries that metaphor through the entire monologue.
Yes. And
so that comparison is important to play with the whole time.
I think that's where I've been that's where the showman has started popping up for me, where it's like, oh, now that I have had the idea, I can drop everything that was going on before.
Yeah. And no, it continues.
Yeah, so it carries through, you know, it's this whole plan is coming from, you know, this hurt or this frustration or whatever it is, it's still coming from that place. And when I can kind of, oh, look, I have a new toy. And then that's the place where the rest of the monologue comes from. And that has always felt hollow. It's always felt contrived. And it's because I'm contriving it every time.
Exactly. And so the last thing that I just want to point out to everybody is you can take really whatever. So we've been talking about driving to the end of each sentence, but we can also look at a monologue to, well, there's the first sentence that I speak and the last sentence that I speak. And those two have to be connected. I have to be driving to the last thing that I say the whole time. So that it takes me this much time to make this point. And that's what's currently, what we're talking about and understanding throughout the construct of this speech. So that's the last thing that we really have time for today. And that's what I would encourage you to work with and play with as you play with this monologue. It's a fun monologue.
It is fun, yeah.
Very good.
Thank you, everyone for coming. And in a little bit, I will send you all an email with a survey to take, just so we can improve our programming and get your thoughts. And it'll be anonymous if you want it to be, but if you want to leave your name, anything positive that you might have to say about what you've learned today or the value of the event, we'll be able to use when we write for grants to continue this program. So anything at all you can share that's constructive or otherwise, we would really appreciate. We're also making a recording of this so you can refer back to it, and I'll send you a link to that as well. For anything else, anybody who might be watching this video later, if you'd like to make a donation towards the Seeing Place, we'll have a link for that as well.
Very good. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.